Well, hello, I'm Josh, and I'm back once again with another great film to tell you about. And today I have a very influential film noir directed by one of the great noir directors. And yet, oddly enough, it's a movie I don't necessarily hear a lot of people talking about nowadays. So here I am to tell you about Fritz Lang's 1953 film noir classic, The Big Heat. Following the apparent suicide of a fellow officer, Detective Dave Banyan is called in to investigate. However, what initially seems like an open and shut case soon proves otherwise when he hears a conflicting report on the recently deceased officer's mental health. As he starts to connect the dots, he is led further and further into the town's criminal underworld, discovering ties with the police that go all the way to the top. But on this crusade for justice, Banyan quickly discovers that the closer he gets to the truth, the more dangerous it becomes for him and his family. So as I said, The Big Heat was directed by Fritz Lang, who's probably the most famous of the directors who came out of the German Expressionist movement. And while his German films, particularly Metropolis and M, were arguably more important and have had more of a cultural impact than those he made in America, I think you can make a pretty good case for The Big Heat making nearly just as big of a mark on the genre. And though it certainly isn't quite as flashy with its visuals as other noirs you'll find, even among Fritz Lang's films, but story-wise it's one of the darkest and most brutal films of the period. And it's one that's really best to experience for yourself knowing as little as possible. So I won't go too far into spoiler territory, but honestly anything past what I've already told you is almost too much in this case. So I guess this is your spoiler warning in case you haven't seen it yet. But if you've already watched the film or still think you might need some convincing, I'll continue on. So as I was saying, while from a visual sense this film may feel a bit less flashy, there is a lot to dig into under the surface, and this film is all about looking under the surface of things. There are two sides to everything in the story, a light side and a dark side, and throughout the film we see both of these sides. For instance, at the beginning we see Banyan and his family spending time together in what looks to be the classic image of the ideal 50s family. This is then contrasted by somewhat parallel scenes with mobster Vince Stone and his girlfriend Debbie Marsh. But as Banyan investigates more, this clear separation of dark and light becomes overturned as each side starts to bleed into the other. The script was based on a serialized story by William P. McGivern, who worked as a police reporter in the 40s, and so as an author he famously specialized in crime stories, often featuring police corruption. And a number of these were made into classic films, such as Odds Against Tomorrow and Shield for Murder. But The Big Heat is still by far his most recognizable work, and it's really no surprise why. The film had a number of shocking moments that stay with you long after the credits roll. If you like watching film noirs from this era of classic Hollywood like I do, you probably have a general idea of what could and could not be shown in a film from those days, given the Hays Code. And though every now and then these noir films can surprise you, there's generally not going to be anything a 20th century audience is going to be too shocked by. And yet I have to say, I found myself being caught off guard by this film multiple times, most famous of them being the coffee pot scene. During an argument between Vince and Debbie, you watch Vince glance over at the boiling coffee pot, and just when it hits you what he's thinking, a hand reaches in and grabs it, splashing it in Debbie's face. It's a horrifying scene, but the thing is, you never actually see her get burned. It happens so fast that you just kind of feel it. And on an interesting, I guess more artistic level, Lang's way of depicting this scene also shows how this action eventually comes back to haunt Vince, as later in the film when Debbie returns to the apartment and does the same thing to him, we now only see Vince hit in the face with coffee flying in from off camera, no hand or coffee pot in view, creating an action that if cut together hints that by burning her, he essentially started a chain of events that would cause that boiling coffee to come back around and burn him. And the interesting thing about Detective Banyan is that despite sort of being the moral fixture in the film as one of the few cops who isn't dirty and the only one who really takes a firm stand against corruption, he, inadvertently or not, becomes the catalyst which leads to a majority of the deaths and violence that happen in this film. So as many critics have pointed out, in contrast to the more common femme fatale, in The Big Heat, Detective Banyan is actually more or less the agent of destruction here. But since the bad guys were caught in the end, he doesn't ever seem to take a second look at his own role in the aftermath. But the filmmakers definitely do in their own clever way. As we see in the final scene, as he is now back on the job, he gets a call for his next case. And as he passes by a conveniently placed sign requesting readers to give blood now, he asks an officer to keep the coffee hot. And that's what I think makes this film so special. On the surface level, it's a satisfying revenge thriller with great acting and direction, but if you want to look deeper, there's much to unpack there too. And the film has had a lot of very notable fans. I mean, on the Blu-ray release alone, you have interviews with Martin Scorsese and Michael Mann, where you can clearly see just how big of an influence this film has had on both of their work. And in addition to the writing and direction, you also have an incredible cast. The film stars Glen as Detective Dave Banyan, and he does an excellent job showing the two sides to the character. We see him loving and fatherly at home, but once all of that is put into danger, he quickly becomes a hardened anti-hero, and Ford had some good experience in film noirs, appearing in one of the most iconic of the era, Gilda, alongside Rita Hayworth. But he was also known for playing memorable roles in classic westerns, such as 3:10 to Yuma and Jubal, along with portraying the wise Jonathan Kent in the 1978 Superman film. And Banyan's wife is played by Jocelyn Brando, and if that last name sounds familiar, she had a famous younger brother, Marlon Brando, who had just recently made a name for himself in the Elia Kazan film Streetcar Named Desire. And she does a great job as the wife who kind of represents the good side of Banyan's life. Another person you might recognize is Gloria Grahame. She's probably best known today for playing Violet in It's a Wonderful Life, but she had a pretty interesting career in Hollywood. Other notable films include The Bad and the Beautiful and In a Lonely Place, but this is really one of her most iconic performances. And after watching, it's pretty easy to see why, as we see her character, who starts off almost secondary to Vince Stone, end up really becoming the one who goes through the most growth in the film, as she decides to help Detective Banyan. And Fritz Lang must have been impressed by her performance too, because he would go on to re-team her with Glen the very next year for his film Human Desire. And of course, everyone loves a great villain, and I don't think you can find many more memorable in film noir than Lee Marvin as Vince Stone. This film came quite early on in his career, when he was pretty much solely known for playing villains in classics like The Wild One, and even as Liberty Valance himself in John Ford's The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And in a smaller role, we also see a familiar face to any Addams Family fans. Carolyn Jones, also known as Morticia Addams, is also here very briefly in the nightclub. And you may recall she also had a bit of a larger part in the film I talked about last summer, Don Siegel's original Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So if you'd like to watch this film, it's available to rent or buy from all the usual places online. And it's also frequently streaming on Amazon Prime as well. And physically, the best version I was able to track down is this one from Indicator. It's got lots of bonus features, the film looks great on it, and it's also region free, so it should work on any Blu-ray player you have. Now if you can wait, I did see that the Criterion Collection is releasing the film in 4K, so that might actually be a better option for you. But regardless, lots to be excited about for fans of The Big Heat. And for my comment question, I am wondering, what is your favorite performance in a film noir? I mean, this film has great ones from Gloria Grahame and Lee Marvin, but the genre is just filled with great performances and great actors. So put your favorites in the comment section down below and start discussing. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you want to see some more of these. Remember to keep watching movies, and I will see you again soon.